Hello, and welcome to the first of many to come speed paints for the Burning Light chapters. For those who may or may not be aware, I have been writing an AU Warriors fanfic focusing on the idea of Scourge killing Firestar in the Darkest Hour, and how things would be changed by that over 30 years later. The fanfiction is currently being written, and you can go read the first few chapters I've posted on AO3 right now. I've also talked about it in the past, so if you want to learn more about it, you can watch all the videos in this playlist. So, for the longest time, I have been wanting to do full illustrations for every single chapter so that while you're reading the story, you have cool pictures to look at. And also, so I could make speed paints on YouTube and talk more about the Burning Light, hee. I struggled to find the inspiration to do this until fairly recently, when I thought of an idea. What if I wasn't just doing simple illustrations of the scenes? What if they were themed somehow? There's already a bunch of themed stuff in the Burning Light, so why not add to it and do something like tarot cards? Going into it, I knew very little about tarot cards, but I decided one day to sit down, do some research, and try to apply at the very least one card to every single chapter, whether that be by tying it to a character or a scene. It was a little hard to put together, and while doing it, I thought I might end up in the end giving up because I was worried it would only get harder. Plot twist, I had the entire deck planned by the end of the night. It was that easy. I had so much fun putting all the ideas together, and now it's time to start putting my ideas to paper. Or, I guess if you want to be more literal, my ideas to iPad and Procreate. Just two disclaimers that I will probably repeat for all of these videos moving forward. Number one, these are fanfic chapter discussions primarily. If you do not want to be spoiled, go and read the chapter first and then come back. And then two, I am not an expert on tarot cards, and you will probably disagree with me on my interpretations of the cards, especially so since I only used one website to really research them. Whoops. Like, interpreting tarot cards is hard, especially when it seems like everybody has their own ideas on what things are supposed to mean. So I just said screw it, and I did my own thing while sticking as close as I could to the vague and or broad descriptions of the website I used, thetarotguide.com. So thank you to that website, and a secondary thank you to Moon Kitty's Warrior Cats as Tarot Cards video for serving as a secondary inspiration for the series I'm doing. But anyway, enough stalling, let's get into the speed paint. So, as you could probably read from the video title, I will be talking about the Burning Light's Prologue, and there are two cards I did for the Prologue. The first card for the Prologue is Death. Oh yeah, we're starting with the Major Arcana card. While I was planning everything out, I started going through the Minor Arcana and knew from the very beginning that I wanted a card to tie into the first half of the prologue, the Battle of Blood Clan through Firestar's perspective up until he dies. Around halfway through, I remembered my limited amount of tarot card knowledge and realized that there was in fact a card I knew of that was already perfect for this: Death. Death, from my understanding, does not necessarily mean literal death, even if in this circumstance it does, kind of in a way. It more or less is a card focusing around change and new beginnings, and does that not fit perfectly with the plot of the Burning Light? The fanfiction is an AU, an alternate universe where a major part of canon is changed, that part of canon being the literal death of an incredibly important character. Like, how perfect is this for Firestar's death? But anyway, on to talking about the actual writing for the prologue. In earlier drafts, I've done a bunch of different things, so this is probably one of the most changed parts of the entire story. It was originally going to be an introduction to the characters Jasper, Alma, and Aldrich, alongside the main antagonist, who I cannot disclose the identity of yet for spoilers. At the time that was what the prologue was, they were much more prominent in different ways. They are arguably more prominent than they would have been at the time, but they're important in a different way. And so that concept of them being in the prologue and it focusing around them would not work. Also, it wouldn't work with like the story anymore. With what the story was for that prologue, it would not have worked at the time. Two of those characters would not even have been there for what this scene was supposed to, or what this scene would have inevitably become. When I finally changed it into something different, it focused on the healer of ThunderClan, Crowfrost, and as that version of the prologue changed and adapted over the years, I introduced the idea of the beginning being about little baby Finchkit reenacting the death of Firestar as a way to kind of bridge the gap between Warriors canon and the Burning Light canon. The Warriors cast we all know and love are long gone, and the Burning Light cast are mostly their descendants. To them, cats like Firestar and Scourge are history, almost in a similar vein to cats like Thunderstar, Shadowstar, Windstar, Riverstar, and Skystar, even if there isn't as big of a span of time between Firestar and the start of the Burning Light as there was to like Dawn of the Clans to Into the Wild. It's also why Firestar's point of view in the Blood Clan battle isn't an exact rewrite of what happens in the Darkest Hour. It's mostly the same, but there are a lot of changes and things that are different. There's a moment where he stops in his tracks and begins to doubt StarClan, if he really is the fire that's supposed to save the clans. When he goes to fight Scourge, the dialogue is completely different and is more to the point and very literal. I want it to be confusing what about it is historically accurate and what parts are just from Finchkit's reenactment. But anyway, back to it being about Crowfrost. In this version of the prologue, I was going to introduce a very important part of the story from the beginning, but the longer I sat with it, the more I did not like it. The thing that was supposed to be introduced here was something that the main cast has no idea about, and I didn't like the idea of this thing unknowingly hanging over the characters' heads that you know about. It technically is. This plot point has not gone anywhere. The only difference is that you, the reader, don't see it. You're in the same boat as Sunny and Blossom and the rest of the cast. You won't see it until they do. When they discover what this is, you'll be feeling the same things as them. Which is why I got rid of the Crowfrost thing entirely and decided to change it to just being focused on the Finchkit reenactment idea and included a flashback featuring Firestar's perspective of the Blood Clan battle. This way, it would focus on just the modern day cats' connection to Firestar, how they feel about Blood Clan, how they feel about Firestar, how long it's been since then, you know, that kind of thing. And now moving on to the second tarot card for the prologue, the Empress. Yeah, 2 major arcana cards for 1 chapter. I decided on the Empress due to its connections to motherhood, pregnancy, and art. The focus of the scene with Finchkit is, well, Finchkit herself, as well as her mother Brindlewing and her grandmother Robinflower, who is pregnant with a litter of kits herself. Not to mention the fact that the entire scene begins through a little play Finchkit is putting on for them. There is a connection to all 3 of the themes I mentioned before in just this short scene, so I think it worked pretty well. For those of you who are familiar with the story and have read ahead, this fact I don't believe gets brought up a whole lot, but 2 other main characters, Blackpaw and Specklepaw, are actually the kits Robinflower is pregnant with during the prologue, which makes Blackpaw and Specklepaw the aunt and uncle of Finchpaw, which is funny considering that they're like all friends. She's 2 months older than them, and then they're all training at the same time. Also, if you want an easy way to tell when the prologue is happening, the prologue occurs right around the same time that Sunny would be born, making her just slightly older than Blackpaw and Specklepaw, but they're all still 11 months old. So the prologue takes place 11 months before chapter 1 does. A later addition to this half of the prologue were the young warriors Maplebriar and Sandstone being there, who are the kits of ThunderClan's current leader Morningstar. I decided to include them for one reason. I wanted Maplebriar to be established earlier on. Something happens to her during the first act, and I felt like it would not only make more sense, but be easier to understand and connect with if you had already met her. Sandstone I included so that she could have one of her littermates to work off of. It was between either Sandstone or their other sister Redfrost, and I think Redfrost would have actually murdered them if they had tried to drag her into playing with Finchkit. Sandstone definitely wants to also murder Maplebriar for dragging them into this, but they have their priorities in order, and making a big fuss over it would just cause more problems for them. But I think that just about wraps this chapter up. I'll keep the series going till the fic is over, and once it is over, there will be a full deck of cool themed The Burning Light tarot cards. I also have planned in the future to do full clan lineup speed paints to introduce all the characters, so that should be fun to put together. But please read The Burning Light if you haven't already.